I was 15 when I first realized how quickly life could turn upside down. I wasn't the type to pick fights or make enemies. I kept to myself, focused on school, and counted the hours until I could go home. But sometimes, it didn't matter what kind of person you were, danger had a way of finding you anyway. Every day I took the bus home, always sitting in the same spot, about 10 rows from the front. It wasn't anything special, just a cracked vinyl seat by the window where I could lean my head against the cool glass and drown out the noise with my music. The first time I saw him, I barely noticed. Just another student, older than me, maybe 18 or 19, sitting a few rows back. I didn't know his name and didn't care to. But that changed fast. It started small, a tap against the back of my seat, a faint rhythmic thud I could barely hear over my headphones. At first, I ignored it, figuring it was just someone fidgeting or tapping their knee. But after a full minute of the steady knocking, I turned around. "Hey, can you stop?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. The guy behind me, tall, built like a linebacker, with dark, watchful eyes, grinned. Yeah, my bad." I turned back, thinking that was the end of it. But then it happened again. Not just tapping this time, harder, more deliberate. A dull thud, thud, thud against my seat. I twisted around again. "Dude, seriously, stop." He held up his hands in mock surrender. All right. I turned back, my shoulders tense. There was something about his tone, something that made my gut twist in a way I didn't like. Still, I didn't want to overreact. He was just being annoying, right? No need to escalate things. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught something, a flicker of metal. I turned my head slightly, pretending to look out the window. He had something in his hand. A knife. Not a huge hunting knife, just a small, sharp blade, maybe an inch long. He was using it to pick at the stitches in the seat, slicing through the old vinyl like it was butter. My pulse spiked. I faced forward, again gripping my backpack tight. Maybe he wasn't trying to scare me. Maybe he was just messing around. But still, who carried a knife like that? I told myself not to panic, but I didn't turn around again. The next day, I convinced myself it was nothing, just a weird, random moment. I took my usual seat. A few minutes later, he got on too, and the tapping started again. Thud, thud, thud. I clenched my jaw. I knew he was doing it on purpose now. Slowly, I turned around. I said stop. He just smiled, a lazy, knowing grin, like he was enjoying this. "I'm not doing anything." His hand rested against the back of my seat. His fingers tapped the vinyl, slow, deliberate. Then he lifted his hand just enough for me to see it. The knife. It was small, but the way he held it, casual, like it was just an extension of his fingers, made my skin crawl, and then he said something that made my blood run cold. "I'm not tapping, I'm stabbing it." I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe. I had no idea what to say to that. I turned forward again, gripping my backpack so tightly my knuckles turned white. I needed to get off this bus. I needed to tell someone. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and texted my mom. "There's a guy behind me with a knife. He's messing with my seat." I don't know what to do. I saw the little dots pop up immediately. "Are you okay?" "Yeah, but I'm scared." "Stay calm. I'm calling the police." My stomach dropped. Calling the cops meant the bus was going to stop. It meant he would know I was the one who told. I felt sick. A few minutes later, I saw flashing lights in the distance. The bus slowed, then pulled over. The driver stood looking confused. "Everyone stay seated." The doors hissed open. A police officer stepped inside. "Who called?" Silence. I kept my eyes forward, frozen. The officer scanned the bus, then asked again. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stand. "I think my mom called." My voice came out shaky, too quiet. The officer motioned for me to step off the bus. My legs felt like lead, but I forced myself to move. Outside, the officer crouched slightly to meet my eye level. "What happened?" I told him everything. And as I spoke, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just some stupid high school drama. It wasn't me being paranoid. I had been scared, and that was enough. They found the knife. Not on him. He had stuffed it inside the ripped lining of the seat. But they searched the area and eventually found it. It wasn't just a pocket knife. It was about 4 inches long, covered in bright pink gems, like something you'd buy at a flea market. But the blade? It was sharp. Too sharp. He was arrested on the spot, for assault, for bringing a weapon onto school property, for threatening a minor. I should have felt relieved, but then the rumors started. By the time I got to school the next day, everyone was talking about it. Except, according to them, I had made the whole thing up. Dude, he was just messing around. It was scissors, not a knife. Why'd you snitch? He wasn't going to do anything. And the worst one, you only called the cops 'cause he's black. That one hit different. I had never cared about race, never cared what someone looked like, where they were from, or who they loved. My parents raised me to respect people, period. But now people were looking at me like I was the bad guy, like I had ruined his life. I started questioning myself. Did I overreact? Did I make a mistake? But then I remembered. The feeling of that knife tapping against my seat. The way he smiled when he said he was stabbing it. And I knew I did the right thing, even if no one else saw it that way. I still think about that day. About how close I came to ignoring my gut instinct. About what could have happened if I had. If there's one thing I learned, it's this. If something feels wrong, don't stay silent. Not everyone will believe you. Not everyone will be on your side. But that doesn't mean you're wrong, and it doesn't mean you should be afraid to speak up. Because sometimes, the difference between walking away and never making it home is just one last stop. I was 17 when it happened. At that age, danger doesn't cross your mind the way it does for adults. You feel invincible, convinced bad things only happen to other people. I took the bus everywhere. School, the gym, friends' houses. I didn't have my own car yet, and my parents were usually too busy to give me a ride. That night was no different. A freezing Sunday. I had just finished my workout, sweat cooling on my skin as I stepped into the biting wind. I checked my phone, 9:45 p.m. The last bus was due in 5 minutes. The streets were almost empty, the kind of silence that makes everything feel unsettling. Snow had started falling again, a fresh layer dusting the pavement. I pulled my hood up and headed to the bus stop, a small glass shelter on a deserted street. A snowstorm had hit earlier that week, and the icy slush still clung to the roads. Streetlights cast long, jagged shadows. I sat on the freezing metal bench, exhaling deeply, my breath fogging in the air. 5 minutes. That's all. I pulled out my phone, scrolling to distract myself from the wind howling through the empty streets. Then my screen refreshed. Bus canceled. My stomach dropped. What the hell? I tapped the app, hoping it was a glitch. Nope. The next bus wouldn't arrive for another hour. I sighed, leaning back against the cold glass. I could have called my parents, but they were out of town for dinner. A taxi would cost more than I had. I was stuck. For the first 10 minutes, I kept my head down, listening to music, until I saw someone approaching from the corner of my eye. A man. He was walking from the far end of the street, moving too slowly. His clothes were layered haphazardly, like he had thrown on whatever he could find. A thick coat, a scarf wound tightly around his neck, and a beanie pulled low over his forehead. His steps were uneven, almost unsteady. I kept my gaze on my phone, pretending not to notice. Maybe he'd walk past. He didn't. Instead, he stepped inside the shelter and sat at the far end of the bench, too close. I shifted slightly, angling my body away. He smelled off. Not like alcohol, but something stale, unwashed. A few seconds passed before he spoke. "When's the bus coming?" His voice was rough, uneven. I hesitated, then pulled out my earphones. I think it's delayed." He didn't respond. Just sat there staring at the ground. Then he started mumbling to himself. I couldn't make out the words, just rapid whispers over and over. Unease prickled down my spine. I tightened my grip on my phone, kept my head down. Don't engage. Just wait it out. I tried to ignore him. Then, a sound. A slow, dragging noise. I glanced up. He had moved closer. Not much, just a few inches, but enough. I looked away again, fingers clenching my phone. Shh! Another inch. I turned, sharply. You okay there? He blinked, bloodshot eyes locking onto mine. His pupils were off, dilated, unfocused. Then, without warning, he lifted his arm, reaching toward me. I jerked back instinctively. That was it. I grabbed my bag and bolted. I ran hard, my breath coming in ragged gasps as I sprinted down the empty street. The freezing air burned my lungs, but I didn't stop. After 4 blocks, I spotted another bus stop, empty. I turned, heart pounding. He wasn't there. A shaky breath left my lips. I sat down, rubbing my hands together for warmth. It was fine. I was fine. Maybe he was just high on something. I leaned back against the cold glass, letting my eyes close for just a second. Knock, knock, knock. I jolted forward, stomach twisting. Turned. He was there. Right outside the shelter, staring at me through the glass. I shot up from the bench. What the hell is wrong with you? My voice shook. He didn't answer. Instead, he started circling the shelter, slow, methodical. My fingers trembled as I grabbed my phone. I'm warning you. Stay back. For a moment, he hesitated. Then, without a word, he lunged. I barely dodged. He hit the ground hard, face smacking against the pavement. My chest heaved as I stumbled back. Then I saw it. Blood. He didn't move. I stood frozen, then cautiously stepped closer. Hey, you okay? Nothing. I fumbled for my phone, hands shaking, and dialed 911. Within minutes, red and blue lights cut through the snow. Paramedics arrived, police searched his pockets for ID. That's when they found it, a photograph, old, creased, but I could still make out the faces, a man, him, and a boy who looked just like me. One of the officers pulled me aside. He's been on heavy medication, probably mistook you for someone else. I stared at the photo. The boy had my same dark hair, same build, same sharp nose. The officer sighed. We checked his record. He lost custody of his son years ago. Never got over it. I had no words. They took him away that night. For treatment, they said. I never saw him again. A week later, I got my driver's license. I haven't taken the bus since. I never liked taking the bus at night, but I didn't have a choice. It was late October, and the air carried that sharp chill that made my breath visible. I had just finished my shift at a small coffee shop downtown. Normally, I worked afternoon shifts, but tonight my manager had begged me to cover for someone, and I had agreed. Big mistake. The last bus to my neighborhood stopped at 10:45 p.m., and I had barely made it. As I stepped onto the nearly empty bus, I took a seat near the front, gripping the strap of my backpack tightly. There were only a few other passengers. A middle-aged woman in a thick coat staring at her phone, a man in a hoodie slumped against the window, and a teenager a few rows back tapping away on his laptop. Nothing out of the ordinary. Except for him. A man sat across the aisle from me, mid-40s, bald, thin, with sunken eyes and a permanent smirk stretched across his face. The moment I sat down, he turned his head toward me. His eyes were sharp, unblinking. I tried not to react, pulling out my phone to text my mom. Just got on the bus. Home soon. I hit send, then glanced up. He was still staring. A familiar chill ran down my spine, the kind that told me something was wrong. I turned away, pretending to scroll through my phone, but I could feel his eyes burning into me. The bus rattled along, stopping every few blocks. More people got off, but no one new got on. After about 15 minutes, it was just me, the hoodie guy in the back, and him. I wanted to move, maybe sit closer to the driver, but something told me that if I reacted too suddenly, he'd take it as an invitation. So I stayed still. Then the worst thing happened. He grinned. A slow, deliberate grin that twisted my stomach, like he knew I was uncomfortable and was enjoying it. The bus was approaching my stop, but suddenly I wasn't sure if I wanted to get off. What if he followed me? My fingers tightened around, the pepper spray in my jacket pocket, just in case. The bus slowed. My stop was coming up. That's when he moved. The moment I reached for the cord, he stood up too quickly, too eagerly. My heart slammed against my ribs. I hesitated. If I got off now, he'd definitely follow. I made a split-second decision. I didn't move. The bus stopped. The doors hissed open. I waited. The driver glanced back, confused. "You getting off?" The man turned to look at me, still grinning. I shook my head. "No, next one." The driver shrugged and pulled away. The man's grin faltered, just for a second. But then he sat back down. I had avoided him following me home. But now I was still trapped on this bus with him. And there weren't many stops left. 2 stops. Later, the hoodie guy in the back got off. That left just me and him. I felt like my breathing was too loud, like every movement I made was exaggerated. I needed to think. If I got off at my usual stop, he'd follow me down a dark, empty street. But if I stayed on too long, I'd end up in a part of town I didn't know. The bus rumbled along, streetlights blurring past the window. Then he did, something that made my blood turn to ice. He leaned in slightly and whispered, "Not your stop either, huh?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. My grip tightened around my backpack as I forced myself to breathe evenly. He chuckled. A low, dry sound. Smart girl. The next stop was coming up. I had to do something. I pulled the cord. I wasn't sure if I was making the right decision, but I had to get off the bus. The doors hissed open. I stood up slowly, pretending to be calm. But as I stepped off, so did he. My stomach dropped. The bus pulled away, leaving us on the sidewalk. The street was too quiet, the only sound a distant hum of traffic. I turned left, walking fast, my keys in one hand, my pepper spray in the other. His footsteps followed a few paces behind. Steady, unhurried. I picked up my pace. So did he. I turned. A corner, hoping to see people. A store. A car. Anything. Nothing. Just dim streetlights and closed shops. I was alone with him. Then I heard him laugh. Low. Amused. Like he was enjoying this. I ran. I sprinted down the sidewalk, heart pounding. I didn't even know where I was going. I just knew I had to get away. Then I saw it. A gas station up ahead. Bright lights. A cashier inside. Safe. I dashed toward it, but then a hand grabbed my backpack. I screamed, twisting away, yanking myself free. I didn't think. I just reacted. I spun around and sprayed the pepper spray directly into his eyes. He howled, stumbling back. I didn't wait to see what he did next. I ran straight into the gas station. The cashier, a guy in his 20s, looked up, startled. "Hey, you okay?" I was shaking, barely able to speak. "That man, he followed me. He grabbed me." The cashier stepped around the counter and peered outside. The man was still there, rubbing his eyes, muttering curses. Then, he grinned at me through the glass, like this wasn't over. The cashier grabbed his phone. "I'm calling the cops." The man turned and walked away. The police came. I gave them a description, but he was gone. They told me I did the right thing by using the spray, but that didn't make me feel any better. Because deep down, I knew. If I hadn't had it, if I hadn't run, he would have caught me. That night, I sat awake in my bed, every creak in my apartment making my skin crawl. I never took the bus at night again, and I never forgot his face, or that grin, because even now sometimes, when I'm walking home alone, I feel it, like someone's watching, waiting, laughing, like he's still out there. And next time, I might not get away. I still don't know why I never told anyone. Maybe I was scared they wouldn't believe me. Maybe I was even more scared that they would. Looking back, I realized just how close I came to something truly terrifying. This happened when I was 12 years old, back in 6th grade. It was the kind of thing you'd expect to see in a true crime documentary, but when it happens to you, it doesn't feel real. It feels like a nightmare you can't wake up from. Every day after school, I took the bus home. It wasn't a long ride, just about 15 minutes, and my mom always picked me up from the bus stop. My parents were never married, and my dad lived nearby, so it made sense for me to get off at a stop close to his house. But I hated being there. We never got along, and his new wife was awful, constantly criticizing me, making me feel like I didn't belong. So every afternoon, I waited outside at the bus stop until my mom pulled up. I never went inside. Usually, that was fine. But that day was different. I remember it being cold, not freezing, but the kind of chill that made me tuck my hands into my sleeves while shifting from foot to foot. The street was busy but not crowded, with cars passing, every so often, and the occasional pedestrian on the sidewalk. I pulled out my flip phone, yeah, one of those old clunky ones, and checked the time. My mom was 10 minutes late. I sent her a text. Me. Hey, where are you? No reply. I waited 5 more minutes and tried again. Me. Mom. Still nothing. Now I was starting to feel uneasy. I wasn't a paranoid kid, but something about standing there alone made me hyper-aware of my surroundings. I felt like I was being watched even though no one seemed to be looking at me. Then my phone buzzed. Mom. Running late. Just go to your dad's and wait inside. Nope. Not happening. I would rather stand in the cold for an hour than set foot in that house. So I stayed put. And that's when I saw him. Across the street, there was a house with a red door. I'd seen it a million times before. Just another boring suburban home. But that day, the door creaked open, and a man stepped outside. He was tall, maybe 6 feet, with curly brown hair and an oversized blue jacket. At first, I didn't think much of it. He could have been taking out the trash or going for a walk, but he wasn't. He just stood there, watching. My stomach twisted. I told myself I was overreacting, that maybe he was spacing out or looking at something behind me. But I knew. I could feel his eyes on me. Then he moved. For a second, I lost sight of him behind a bush, but my gut told me he was getting closer. That's when I called my mom. She didn't pick up right away. 3 tries before I finally heard her voice. Mom. Hey, honey. I'll be there in 10 minutes, okay? Her voice made me feel a little better, but my nerves were still on edge. Me. Okay, just hurry, please. Mom. Are you okay? Me. Yeah, just cold. That was a lie. But I didn't want to sound dramatic. We talked for another minute before I hung up. I let out a slow breath, telling myself that in just 10 minutes I'd be safe in her car. And then the man rounded the corner. He was right in front of me now. Up close, he looked older than I expected, maybe late 30s. His smile was off. Not friendly, not warm, just wrong. Him. Hey, I've been watching you. My whole body went stiff. Him. You've been standing out here a while. Why don't you come inside and wait? I forced a nervous laugh. Me. Oh, my mom's almost here, so I'll just wait. His smile faded. Him. Come on. Just for a second. He stepped closer. I backed away. My mind was racing. Should I run? Should I scream? I wanted to call my mom again, but my hands felt frozen. Then he reached out. I jerked back, heart pounding. But just as he moved toward me, a woman jogged around the corner. She didn't even look at us, but it was enough. I grabbed onto the moment like a lifeline. Me. Oh, hey, Mom. I sprinted toward the jogger before he could react. I didn't stop until I was halfway up the street, far enough that I couldn't see him anymore. Then I called my mom. I didn't tell her. I just said I got bored and went for a walk. When she picked me up, I stayed quiet. I don't know why. Maybe I was afraid she wouldn't believe me. Maybe I just wanted to forget. And I did. For a while. A year later, I was at my dad's house for dinner when I heard them talking. Dad, did you hear about that guy up the street? Stepmom. The one who went to jail? Yeah, my ears perked up. Dad, apparently he beat some guy to death in the park. Stepmom. Yeah, and they think he was luring girls there too. He used candy or something. My stomach dropped. Me. Where did he live? Stepmom. Oh, you know that. House with the red door? Right next to the park. I felt ice cold. I wanted to tell them. I wanted to scream. But I didn't, because I already knew. And I didn't need anyone to confirm that I had barely escaped something unspeakable. I still think about that day, about what would have happened if I had stepped closer, if I had let him grab me. If the jogger had never shown up, I was lucky. Not everyone is. So please, always be aware of your surroundings. Because sometimes the difference between life and death is just a matter of seconds. I never liked taking the bus. Public transportation always made me uneasy, but I told myself it was just anxiety, just my overactive imagination turning every harmless stranger into a potential threat. That's what I thought that night too, even when my gut kept warning me that something was off. But I ignored it. I told myself I was just being paranoid. I learned the hard way that I should have listened. It was late, later than I wanted it to be. I had stayed behind at work to help close up, and by the time I stepped outside, the streets were nearly empty. The glow of the streetlights reflected off damp pavement, and the only sounds were distant traffic and the occasional rustle of a stray plastic bag caught in the wind. I tugged my hoodie tighter around me, feeling the chill of the night air. The bus stop wasn't far, just a 5-minute walk down the road, but every step felt longer than usual. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the way the shadows stretched, too far under the flickering streetlights, or maybe it was the man standing at the bus stop. I noticed him from a distance, a tall, broad-shouldered figure dressed in dark clothing. He stood too still, his face obscured by the shadow of his hood. I forced myself to keep walking, my fingers tightening around my bag strap. It's fine. It's just another passenger. But something about him set me on edge. When I reached the stop, I hesitated for a split second before sitting at the farthest end of the bench, putting as much space as I could between us. The man didn't move, didn't even shift his weight, just stood there, facing the empty street. I glanced at my phone. The bus was due in 5 minutes. I prayed it wouldn't be late. A few minutes passed. The man still hadn't moved. I stole another glance at him from the corner of my eye. His hands were buried deep in his pockets, his shoulders slightly hunched. Something about his posture seemed tense, like he was waiting for something, or someone. A car passed by, its headlights illuminating the bus stop for a brief second. That's when I noticed it. His shoes. They were wet. Soaking, actually. Water dripped from them onto the pavement, pooling around his feet. But it hadn't rained that evening. A slow, creeping unease settled in my chest. I looked away, my pulse quickening. That's when I heard it. A whisper, low, muffled, almost like a voice carried on the wind. I froze, my fingers tightening around my phone. The whispering continued, soft, urgent, coming from somewhere close. Too close. I turned my head slightly, heart hammering against my ribs. The man was still standing there, his face hidden, but his lips were moving. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to breathe evenly. Maybe he's just talking to himself. Maybe he has an earpiece in. Or maybe I'm overreacting again. The bus needed to get here. Now. I looked down the road. Empty. Nothing but endless pavement stretching into darkness. The whispering stopped. I turned back toward the man. He was staring at me. A jolt of cold fear shot through me. His face was partially hidden by the hood, but I could see his eyes, dark, wide, locked onto mine. I forced myself to hold his gaze for half a second before looking away, my breathing shaky. Then he did something that made my stomach drop. He stepped closer. Not much, just half a step. Barely noticeable, but I noticed. I gripped my bag tighter, my thoughts racing. Was I overreacting? Should I leave? But where would I go? The next bus stop was too far, and I didn't want to walk alone at this hour. I glanced at my phone again. 2 minutes. Just 2 more minutes. Another figure approached from the opposite end of the street. A woman, maybe in her 30s, wearing a faded jacket and jeans. She didn't seem to notice anything off as she walked toward the stop. Her eyes, focused on her phone. Relief flooded through me. She stopped a few feet away and glanced up briefly. "Bus late?" she asked casually. I forced a small smile. "Yeah, should be here soon." She nodded, turning her attention back to her screen. I risked another glance at the man. He was still staring. But now, he was grinning. My blood turned to ice. It wasn't a normal smile. It was wrong, wide, too wide, like his face didn't quite know how to move naturally. The woman beside me must have noticed my tension because she glanced up from her phone. She followed my gaze and frowned slightly. "You all right?" she murmured. I hesitated. I didn't want to seem crazy. But then, a low chuckle cut through the silence. My heart nearly stopped. It came from him. The woman stiffened. I wasn't imagining this. The bus finally appeared in the distance, its headlights cutting through the darkness. A wave of relief washed over me, so strong it nearly made me dizzy. As it approached, the man took another step forward, then another. I could hear his breathing now, ragged, uneven. The woman moved closer to me, subtly shifting so she was between us. I don't think she even realized she did it. The bus hissed to a stop in front of us. The doors creaked open. The man didn't move. The woman and I hesitated for half a second before practically lunging inside. The moment we were in, the doors shut behind us. I turned to look out the window, expecting to see him still standing there. But he was gone. The bus pulled away and I let out a shaky breath, my body finally relaxing. The woman sat beside me, her face tense. "You saw that, right?" I whispered. She nodded slowly. Yeah, neither of us said anything else. The rest of the ride was silent, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we had just escaped something we weren't supposed to. And when I finally got home, I realized something that made my stomach drop all over. Again, the pavement where the man had stood had been dry, but his shoes had been soaking wet, and I had no idea why. I still don't know what really happened that night. I tried searching, missing persons reports, police records, anything that might explain who he was or why he was there. I found nothing. But sometimes, when I'm alone at a bus stop late at night, I swear I can still hear whispering, and I never, ever take the last bus anymore.